for the warm welcome. It's really great to be here tonight. I'm excited. I don't know how I managed this, but this is the first online panel I've moderated. So I made it 20 months into the pandemic and hoping I don't screw this up too badly. So thank you so much for everyone joining us. What I thought we'd do is maybe just start off by having Ron and Pushkar introduce themselves and maybe just tell us a little bit about why you're excited to be here today. Ron, did you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for introducing, and really grateful to be here today. Quite excited to, UX in general is a pillar in what we try to achieve at Xpan. My role, I'm founder and CEO of Xpan Interactive. We are 20 years into this journey of using technology as a conduit for the transfer of knowledge across a number of different modalities and a different various areas, from industry to government to post-secondary academia as well, and have a bit of a global footprint. So we're able to understand the human condition of knowledge and how we actually are consuming it, and using the human habituation for the digestion of digital media, and how we can actually utilize that for the transfer of knowledge as well. And so I'm very excited to be here and grateful to be talking to a hometown group of Calgary UX passionate people around one of these great pillars of how we can intersect knowledge and technology and humans together in a great solution.
Great. Pushkar, what are your first thoughts?
Hi, I'm Pushkar. As Luis mentioned, I'm a UX UI lead at Archiact VR. It's a AAA game studio where we make immersive games like Doom 3 VR, which we just shipped about 6 months ago. Just time is such a weird thing in pandemic, right? Like it seems like a long time ago, but it was just 6 months ago. I also teach at Vancouver Film School's VR AR program, where I teach human-centered design and I teach data visualization, both for VR and AR. And I'm very excited to be here because there are two things I love talking about. One is user experience design, and second is technology. And this seems like the perfect opportunity to talk about kind of both. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much. It's interesting coming from a traditional sort of university experience and thinking about how much our world has changed, certainly since the start of pandemic, and where change has really been accelerated. These technologies and things were all advancing, but COVID has really sped a lot of that up. So I think it's a really great opportunity, like you say, to bring together this idea of technology and education and talk about what some of that transfer of information looks like. What I'll do is sort of just lead us into a bit of a discussion. We'll have an opportunity for Q&A sort of with people at the end, but sort of to kick us off, I'll pose this question maybe to Ron to get us started. How has technological innovation changed the way that we live our everyday lives, sort of from your perspective and in your words?
So we're going to go right for the big question, are we?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's safe to say technology has permeated every part of our society, right, and disrupted many parts of it as well, and sort of taken hold. I want to maybe speak a little bit about towards what that actually means. So rather than looking at cause and effect, or chicken and egg, maybe we'll look at where we are as a society right now with technology at the helm, and we're seeing in terms of knowledge as our foundation today. We look at students having perhaps shorter attention spans or shallower consumption of knowledge, and this lowering of intellectualism across the board. But we also have this wider matrix of knowledge available to us. We can actually get a hold of everything. And what we're seeing as a consequence of this is really this sort of lowering of empathy and trust, unfortunately, and there's a bit of a polarization in our society right now. So whether technology is a cause, we can debate that one for a bit, but we're seeing this opportunity now, and really, for the group here as ambassadors of knowledge, to really, sort of bridge that chasm of knowledge in humans to actually, transfer knowledge better, as well as, being that advocate for the humans, and creating, what I see the need is in terms of increasing of knowledge transfer, as well as empathy and trust in our society, because we're seeing this growth of this matrix of this polarization, unfortunately. But I do think we have so many great advocates for human-centered design is sort of where we need to go. And I believe that for the most part, this ubiquitous or this democratization of knowledge is really at the forefront. And institutions like University of Lethbridge and progressive institutions like that that understand that progressive design, as well as the entrepreneurialism like Pushkar at the grassroots level, together we can actually create a real change of how we actually change knowledge and how we can adapt behavior at the end of the day.
Short answer. How would you see some of these changes sort of just in everyday life?
So as far as the game development and coming up with immersive tech, the industry that I'm in, we have been using remote collaboration tools for a very long time. For example, things like GitHub or stuff like that for version control. But I feel like these kind of technology that lets us collaborate together from different distances, because we have teams spread out throughout Canada now. And before the pandemic, we were mainly focused in Vancouver. And it has completely changed, almost like the industry got the push, just got thrown into remote working on day one. The story is pretty similar to what everybody's talking about, but our tech stack for remote collaboration has grown. There are tools that we use to brainstorm together, like Miro, which is basically an online whiteboard that we collaborate on. We use Jira to track things. We use Confluence to write our feature briefs, come up with meetings together to debate and collaborate. We use Slack, things like that. So the tech stack has, I feel like, always been there. We just didn't need to use it for a daily basis. But COVID just kind of pushed us into this thing that we had to. And traditionally, there have been game studios like Ubisoft, which have been situated in Montreal, for example, and they had studios working on the same product in, say, Pune in India or in Eastern Europe. So they were remotely collaborating. It just, within the country, they were not. But now we always have these tools. We just started leveraging them come that date. So yeah, and I feel like VR and AR are kind of forefront of this industry because it is a tool for remote collaboration, right? So for one of my classes, just to give you an example, we prototype in a game called Rec Room. And Rec Room might seem like a game. Most people go have fun, shoot some things. But we in classes, we collaborate and prototype in this game because it's basically a game engine that lets us collaborate. So this cohort, the one just September or November they passed out, they were spread out throughout North America. I even had a student in India because he couldn't join us in Vancouver. He tried, but the whole borders were closed. So he was there and we were collaborating together from Caribbean, me from here, someone from Victoria Island. So some of were far, some were in Mexico. So my whole cohort was kind of spread out. So these tools we had to use, the tools we had to kind of switch and be remote in like 3 months. And I feel like same for your university, you have to become remote. Almost like, seems like overnight. And now we've been doing it for 2 years. So yeah.
And it felt overnight. If you'd have asked our institution, 2 years ago, if you could flip to online delivery by Monday, no, they would have told you were crazy, but we did. The decisions were made, campuses were closed, and people scrambled and put things together. So I really appreciate your share around this idea of the, these collaborative technologies and how people are working more closely together and how you've seen that really that direct, connection in your industry. Ron, I'm wondering from, for you and for Xpan, what are some of the advancements that you've seen sort of within your industry that have really kind of come out of this COVID crisis?
Absolutely. We've seen a transformation in our industry in the last 5 years. And when COVID hit, it was certainly a catalyst for that acceleration. So, the digital transformation in terms of how people actually can collaborate, those barriers have continually been coming down. And with technologies such as the platforms that Pushkar was referring to. So we're seeing that, institutions and organizations are somewhere in the spectrum of that digital transformation. And when COVID hit, they were forced to really leapfrog ahead. And some didn't do so well, and some did very well in terms of that acceleration. They were ready. So when it comes to some of the new adaptive technology, taking those classroom or taking those more traditional ways of blended learning into more, more advanced, asynchronous and or blended learning and synchronous environments, we had the ability to, keep that relevancy and keep that sort of the cultural side of it as well in place when it came to digital technology. So we saw the real adoption of AI, AR, and XR, and when it came to learning, we came to pushing knowledge to where it can be in the user's hands in real time. So we saw these trends around micro-credentialing, pushing content to other platforms rather than learning management systems, of course, into AR and VR, and now we can actually intermix digital media with those real physical worlds, and also really helping and advocating for faculty and teachers and actually enabling them, empowering them to do so much more, and maintaining that sort of that cultural piece that they've maintained over in the classroom and taking that online. And I think people realized very quickly that we can actually, transfer skills, and not just competency and compliance, but actually behavior and the application of knowledge in a digital environment. And so it's wonderful to see some of the technology that we're utilizing now that not only can broaden that spectrum of compliance all the way through to behavior, but we can actually now measure the fulfillment of a learner and how happy they are in that journey as well, using some of this AI technology. So, the content that we deliver has that highly experiential side of it, but the platform that it sits upon also can measure every attribute of it as well. And we have some wonderful opportunities with that as we go forward as well. I think we're just in early days, and that transformation will only continue.
I'm wondering what you see when you're looking at sort of how technology has impacted the student, and what sort of skills, like what are the different ways of thinking and the different sort of mental things that we're asking students to now bring to the table to be able to learn in these types of environments?
Pushkar, you want to go first, or? Okay, I'll jump in terms of the students. They're first of all, this young generation is very adaptable. They're endemic to the digital spectrum. I mean, the ability to learn and unlearn and consume via technology is wonderful to see. I mean, my kids teach me how to do that, which is fantastic. So we're seeing the ability to learn and unlearn those skills very quickly and be adaptable to technology. And one of the risks around that is trying to move from a traditional and just move that to digital, where we actually have to rethink of how we actually can have those peer-to-peer and social connections in digital environments, how we can actually create mentorship and really that sort of enablement for students that might be feeling isolated now as well, especially in a pandemic where they might be working at home alone. And we still have to ensure that as humans, we're social beings, and the way we learn is through that application of knowledge and play. And that's right. So it's by adopting some of the best practices from other industries like gaming, like film, advertising, and some of those other areas, we can really increase that engagement in digital technology, and the kids will adapt to that very quickly. I mean, I look at some of the fun parts around the TikTok or Snapchats of how we can actually push knowledge to those fun platforms as well.
Pushkar, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with Ron. I feel like this generation, and I'm slightly older, I'm not as young as I look, but this generation is very adaptable. They'll pick up things and they drop things also pretty quickly. And we just being lucky enough to live in this world where there's plethora of tools available to us. And I look at everything as a tool, right? Like YouTube is a tool to learn. Like you can spend the whole day watching cat videos, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like there are so many, like I have taught myself to model in 3D completely on YouTube. I never went to school because I just didn't have the time. So every time I have a problem, I look up a video, I learn things. And I feel like my students are even way ahead. They're not only learning themselves from these TikTok and YouTube and all these things you're talking about, things like LinkedIn Learning, Lynda, these all resources are on plural side. These resources are available to us. And the young generation is using it really, really well. And I feel like sometimes it's one way I look at it like somehow this is easier than what we were doing about 5-10 years ago, because when we were sending an email, we were abstracting our thoughts into text, but now we just communicate like as if we are in the same room. So we are removing some abstraction, like just like writing with a pencil or Apple Pencil is easier than designing with a mouse. So we are removing abstractions, and we're kind of going back to how communication was, like we're giving speeches, we're talking about things. So it's removing abstraction, and also at the same time we are we have these tools that are so easily available, and the UX part comes really, really well in. I'm sorry, I'm going to shoehorn UX into it because I feel like I'm a designer, and these softwares have become so easy to use that it's not like Maya 10 years ago that you need like some rocket scientist mind to understand how to design it. But now I can 3D model, put on my VR headset, just make a sculpture, and it can look pretty good. So I feel like the user experience of making these things has become easier and easier and easier. And I feel like it's such a positive movement going in the right direction, because when that kid in his basement designs a AAA game in VR, we all win, right? Because the technology is kind of democratized. Just like how photography became democratized when we got phones. Like we had a camera on a phone, but before that I had to have this DSLR camera and I have this fancy long lens. Then I'm a photographer. But now I'm a photographer with just that. So I feel like this technology is an enabler, and it just step in the right direction. We have some privacy issues, but I feel like they will get weeded out as we go, and we talk about them more. So if we talk about these issues, the bad things, and we embrace the good things, and I feel like it's going to move in a positive direction.
Mm-hmm. As this technology continues to change and improves, you make a really great, analogy comparing that, when you had to have a camera with the telegraphic lens compared to you can produce entire movies on your iPhone now. So as that technology continually changes and improves, how do we, as educational institutions or as groups that support learning and education, how do you stay ahead of that to understand what skills is it even that we need to teach someone 5 years from now when things are evolving and changing so quickly? Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, looking back in history is sort of, the way we can learn forward, right? And I love the photography analogy. We can go back to media publishing, virtually every industry that got transformed, and now education is going through its own transformation. And so staying relevant is going to be key, and being adaptable and being nimble in terms of how we do it. But institutions have a great opportunity to have that sort of steadfast best practice of how we can actually, have, true knowledge and what, coming back to true adult learning principles and how the neurology of learning is applied, and how you can actually collaborate now with industry, with students, and create an ecosystem where, transfer is, the transfer of knowledge is applied and utilized in our society. And it's wonderful to have the tools available to actually scale that faster with the technology that we have, through those, the YouTube videos or whatever it may be, because there is a democratization of knowledge. We can learn anything on our own. And so it's no longer considered a real commodity. And so what is a commodity is that experience, and what we're actually changing in a human, and that delta is really that commodity. So public education institutions and post-academia have a real valuable, ecosystem to do that. And they're not going to go away anytime soon. I think they're going to be, they're going to be the key to that transition to a new education paradigm.
Yeah, agree 100%. It's interesting watching an entire industry try to shift. Universities have been somewhat steadfast. And I speak from a university perspective because that's the environment I come from, but steadfast for, decades, hundreds, centuries, long periods of time, and everything in the world has shifted now so quickly. It's interesting to watch us as an industry now trying to figure out, okay, well, you can go and learn these things for yourself on YouTube. So what's the value? What's the thing that we can provide as educational institutions that still make, certain ways of learning or credentials and some of these things still important? I feel like I'm a generation of Google. That was my YouTube. I'm not that old, but it's, you don't know an answer, you ask Google. And I often tell my kids, well, when they ask me something, it's like, I don't know, ask Google. So that technology piece is really kind of interesting. Did you have any thoughts on that, Pushkar?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is, like you said that formal education has been a bit slow to adapt to change, but I feel like it just needed that push, and it's kind of embraced it in a really good way. And to answer your question that how do we keep up, the simple answer is we can't, right? Because the technology changes so fast, and what we learn, what I teach today is probably irrelevant in a year and a half, because we are such at the cutting edge of technology. And this happens when the industry is new, right? So I'm just not just talking about VR, AR, but I'm just talking about digital technology as a whole. It changes so fast. So whatever we teach is irrelevant. If we teach software, if we teach the tools, But I feel like one of the ways to tackle that is to kind of inculcate that sense of continuous learning. So if you inculcate that idea into students that whatever you learn today is going to be obsolete tomorrow, just get into that mindset about continuous learning. Like, I'll just give you an example. I think I mentioned this before in the last talk. Like, the last 3 games I have designed have been in 3 completely different game engines. So first game was Unity, second was client's own engine, and now what we're making is Unreal Engine. And Unreal Engine is completely changing from a version 4 to 5, and it's like night and day. So we have to learn as we build. And so another project that we're working on, the game engine is being built as we are making games. So this is how fast it develops. And whatever we're making, the problems we see used today, tomorrow they're going to be done like with the code block. Like, I just bring it. So, like, I feel like teaching that core skill is not relevant anymore. It's just like the habit of you're going to have to learn continuously. Because I went to art school about 17, 18 years ago, and everything I learned in graphic design school, I used it all my years in advertising. But it's irrelevant now because the media has changed. How advertising industry makes money has changed. So all those things are obsolete. But when we look at gaming industry also, it's always been the kind of a experimental industry that kind of embraces change quickly and pass it on to the consumer. So we are at that place, but I feel like that whole mindset about continuously learning, and the point that I was trying to make is like, when I went to art school, things have completely changed. So I took a break and I went back after 17 years to do my master's here in Canada. And I went to it's just fortunate that I went to this program at the Center for Digital Media. It's a program created by UBC, SFU, BCIT, and Emily Carr, 4 of them. And they put together this program because nothing like that existed. So they teach us mainly soft skills. They do not teach us any software. They just put this mindset into us that things are going to change and you're going to be at the cutting edge of the technology. So keep up, because you will have to change. Things are going to be new all the time. This is the path you chose. Right? I feel like if we introduce that idea into students, they will never be like, oh, I know everything, because honestly, we don't know. There's so many unknowns, right? So they keep changing.
Yeah, and I think that point is key. It's not about teaching someone a software or a particular technology, because those things are evolving so quickly. It's about whether it's a mindset or a skill set that allows you to adapt to whatever that new technology will be. So yeah, it's just kind of wild that things are accelerating at such a quick pace. I don't know, I as a grown-up struggle, like when I think about my grandparents, when you tried to get them to use a bank card for the first time. And I feel like I'm that person now, because the technology changes so quick, and that you get to a point where you're like, I don't know if I need that anymore. So it's interesting as we start talking about adult learners and adult students and some of this technology, and just trying to think, okay, well, we know, current generation, like you say, are very tech savvy, very digital literate. Our older students may not be. So it's interesting to think, well, how do you get them to engage with some of these technologies, particularly around the learning, when it may just not be something that's top of mind for them. So it's all really kind of interconnected and quite interesting. I'm going to switch us over to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. And so we're seeing a lot of these AI powered technologies like chatbots and some of these, very tailored shopping recommendations. And these things are really starting to become more and more common and frequent as we're encountering them with technology. And so, as from a consumer point of view, you really are learning to embrace some of that AI. So with human-centered AI examines data sort of through that prism of human behavior, it allows businesses to gain that deeper understanding for their customers. So maybe Pushkar will kind of just flip the order and go back to you for a second. For those in the audience who may not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit about what a voice user interface is and how you see this kind of technology evolving and really shaping experiences in the future?
Yeah, so to be honest, I'm not an expert on AI. I know the user interface or the voice interface part of things. We have been looking into the OpenAI and GPT-3, which is basically a conversational AI system, but I'm not an expert on that. I would just like to explain from my point of view, like a user experience designer point of view, that voice activated user interface is basically things like Siri or Alexa. And they are great examples of that, because just as I press a button and I say, put this thing in my shopping cart, you can just tell Alexa, Alexa, order toilet paper. And it's exactly the same. It just, instead of me using a keyboard input, I use voice as an input. So this is the core of the technology. And to be honest, I feel like voice is still the best way to communicate an idea. That's what we're doing right here, right now. Right? We're just talking, because instead of me making a film and sharing it with you all, I feel like we just talk and debate and things like that. So voice is very powerful as an interface or to communicate ideas. There have been some very interesting experiments with voice and AR. For example, Bose, which is the headphones company, they created these glasses which have AR, which is not visual, but it's only voice activated. So for example, you're wearing glasses and you say, it could be a location-based story. So for example, you go to a museum at this particular place, it will tell you about what that piece is about. And Facebook and Google have been all experimenting with voice, because when I'm walking around with AR and I start waving my hands, that might seem super weird if I'm on the street. I remember first time when I was in India, this time 20 years ago, my CEO, he came from abroad somewhere, and he got these like a headphone to talk on the phone, and we thought the CEO has gone crazy because he was just waving his hands. And I feel like with AR, it's going to be something very similar. But when you're talking while you're driving a car and you say, hey, Tesla, show me the map, and it just shows you the map, it's pretty easy. Just like how we socially accept it is a whole different question. But Facebook also recently launched these Ray-Ban enabled glasses, and they have cameras in them and they have voice. I'm not 100% sure, but Bose did some pretty interesting experiments on location-based voice input. I hope that answers the question. I didn't go too much into AI because I don't know much about it.
That's okay. Do you see some of these voice interfaces becoming more prevalent within gaming, in games as you're designing them? Because it still seems to rely a lot on tactile manipulation of a controller or some of those pieces.
So we just recently got hand tracking, not recently, like about a year ago. Games are bringing that into VR, because the more we use it, better the AI will learn. And with visual interface, we could use hand tracking to do things like grabbing things or throwing things. It's still a work in progress. That's why you don't see many new games using it. Same thing with voice. Oculus has a software which is just used as a voice command. So for example, if you are if you don't have the range of mobility as many able-bodied people are, if you have any disabilities, they could actually say, hey Oculus or hey game, fire the gun, and it will start firing the gun. So Oculus has that interface, just like it's been a bit slow to adopt, because games usually take about 1 or 2 years to build, like at least the medium-sized one. So it was just launched about, I think, 6 months ago or something. Soon you'll start seeing these things used more and more. Usually the indie games adopt tech much faster, and then we, like in AAA, we kind of learn from their failures and their experience, and then we adapt, and then even the bigger ones, they'll adapt, and soon it'll be everywhere. So I feel like it's in that path of kind of discovery and experimentation. It is exciting though, because it not only helps accessibility cause, but it also helps me when I'm just feeling super lazy one day. I could just say, hey Netflix, play my favorite film, and it knows which one, and it'll just start playing that one. And I feel like it's such a win for everyone.
And I just feel like it's another thing that won't listen to me. So I'm not sure
with
how that works.
Accent is going to be pretty bad, but I think it should be.
Yeah. No. That's really great. Thank you. Ron, stepping over to you, how do you see artificial intelligence playing a role in this, learning and teaching and e-class kind of experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think AI, we're seeing it already being, allowing very adaptive learning. So making relevant journeys and learning paths for learners. And actually the voice user interface is something we're going to be seeing more and more in learning as well. We've been playing with that at Xpan as well, allowing students to interface with exams using audio as well. So, but I think where it's going, and, when we're seeing organizations adopt certain parts of this already, where AI will not only understand, who you may be as a human, but also what you know. And so we can introduce other aspects like biometrics or geolocation, understand sort of what you know, what competencies you may have, where you are, relevant to maybe where your organization or your institution, and what you should be knowing in your role in life, and maybe looking at that gap and then feeding you that knowledge in real time to make sure that you're safe and making sure that you're productive. And there's various ways to look at that. So AI is going to be basically, disrupting a lot of pieces along that journey. And we're only in early days of that. But right now we're seeing the ability to measure also and provide, again, that fulfilling experience for a learner, because we can make it very relevant. They might be able to go through their learning journey and looking at a piece of a learning object, and perhaps they want to go into the classroom for that piece of learning, or maybe they want to do a VR experience, or maybe they just want to go through an asynchronous e-learning, but come out with the same competency at the end of the day. But with AI, it allows it to be adaptive enough for them to have a one that's specific to them as a person. So it's quite exciting for us. We're seeing some of our research right now is that we can actually look at pre and post learning, as well as session data from learning, and actually be very predictive in our machine learning of the outcome. So not just like that they pass a test, but will this person actually be good in that role? Or is this actually suitable for them as a person, and will they be fulfilled in that role? And so our correlations in that world are becoming very good in terms of very adaptive AI when it comes to learning.
And what would you say is a development that you think is really sort of maybe something that's just on, just up and coming, that's really going to impact us as we look at how we learn in the future?
Yeah, we're excited certainly about the combination between AR and AI. Certainly, virtual reality is something that we can immerse people into for that empathic immersions for things. But basically injecting digital media into a person's life in terms of providing that information in real time is very exciting for us. And if we look at that the other way and looking at bringing learning into their environment as well. So whether it might be an operation, it might be the anatomy or a bus, it could be anything at this point. So that intersection between physical and digital and how people learn is going to be very exciting for us. And we're seeing some of the new modalities for learning is in virtual production, digital production as well. I mean, movies are doing it already in terms of putting not really having to be in that physical space, but actually creating it in a virtual environment. And then also that the ability to have that utilizing some of the things like Meta or those social VR platforms where we can actually put students in the same place virtually to collaborate and have that peer-to-peer knowledge as well. So lots of excitement in different areas as well.
Really great. Pushkar, you kind of touched on this a little bit already in terms of how you might be designing things to be more accessible to people with different sort of obstacles and barriers. As we see populations aging and getting older, how do you see UX really playing a role in how we design experiences to allow people to make use of technology more sort of universally?
It's certainly an interesting challenge, and I feel like that's the challenge that we've had for a while. So we have been working with aging population, or also not everybody learns in the same way. We know this from educational institutions for a long time. So some of us are visual learners, some of us are auditory learners, some of us are combination, some of us are more experiential. So that's where I feel like technologies like VR and AR, and which Ron was also talking about, like embedding things into your own world, like the user's world. I feel like these are things that not only help with aging population, but it also helps when we look at accessibility. I feel like everybody benefits, because it could be AR, could be something like I'm wearing these glasses and could be doing something as simple as learning a new language. So when I wear these glasses, I see everything in my house with a French name on it. Like, what is this light called in French, and what is this wall called in French? And pretty soon, when I start seeing these things around, I could start picking up those words in French. That could be something very simple adaptation of AR. But at the same time, now there are surgeons learning how to do surgery in VR, and soon VR right now, because VR is more mature at its stage, but soon we will have AR glasses and this stuff will start moving to AR. It's there right now, but I feel like it's way too expensive for people to go. But if you think about it, a $3,500 HoloLens for you and I to play a game is pretty expensive. But if you're looking at somebody learning brain surgery, it's nothing, right? It's not a huge cost. So that's why medicine, like industry like medicine, construction, architecture, and military have been adopting AR tech much faster. For us consumer, we have VR, and I feel like the UX is pretty similar because it's spatial UX. So once we figure out this UX, it can be easily adaptable to AR or whatever new technology, because I feel like it's going to get into something digital and physical, and we have this pretty bad term which I hate, the phygital interfaces, where we see things and we interact them physically, but it's overlaid with information like Ron was talking about in AR. So for aging population, to come back to that, there are things about keeping the mind fresh for elderly who are suffering with things like Alzheimer's, to relive the memories or keep the mind fresh by doing memory puzzles, or even things like traveling for those with limited mobility. So there has been consistently a lot of really good work in academia and medicine side. I feel like it just one of the things that our studio worked in, I can't really talk about this because we have ironclad NDAs, but one of the things was rehab, like body rehab exercises in VR. And I feel like most of you could pretty much imagine that if I have like a hand surgery, I could just do these exercises using hand tracking to get better. And the voiceover or the therapist is AI, but you can also always call the real therapist and they could set up things for you. So there have been a lot of interesting things in medicine, especially for elderly, on learning. It's all towards a very positive, it's very exciting. I'm on the game side, but we also do business solutions, and for these kind of things, that is always a work for hire. So it's usually for a bigger company in a specified industry. So we're not allowed to talk about it, but we develop them because we have the text. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. It does. And we won't push for you to share any details. That's okay. As we talk about skills and technology and how students learn, we talked a little bit about, not teaching to a software, but really helping people develop a skill set. It's possible that there's things that we do around learning right now, things like memorization, that idea of teaching by rote and by repetition, may not be skills that students rely on in the future if technology is able to support and feed knowledge and keep people moving that way. So would you agree that memorization is perhaps a skill that students in the future may not need as much? And are there other sort of mental skills that you can think of that this type of technology may change?
Memorization is certainly becoming less and less, required, and the application of knowledge is something we're going to have to look at. I know my own kids, they're like, why do I have to learn, the multiplication table when I can just use a calculator? Is always a great example. But those are always foundational pieces, and that memorization and that sort of cognitive load is always a good foundation for other abstract thinking as you evolve and grow older and get more specialized in areas. So I do think memorization still has a place in learning. Other skills are in terms of the emotional intelligence and the human connections, technology and the ability to unlearn and be adaptive. There's when we learn about, getting, when you sit in front of a steering wheel for the first time in a car, or at the piano where you put on the skis for the first time, that feeling you have when you're first learning, and you have those subtle pieces that help you and give you those cognitive pushes, whether it's like, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, or, where's middle C, and just having that sort of emotional regularity that you can actually get things into your brain to learn. Those are great things to understand, and how can we actually pass those on to learners using technology rather than having that, say, the elder. I mean, we're a story-based and oral-based species, really, in terms of thousands of years. So how can we utilize technology to pass that down to future learners as well? And so the skills are going to be oratory, and I think voice is going to be a big part of that, and how we tell stories and how we connect with other humans.
Pushkar, would you build on that at all?
Yeah, I think those skills that Ron's talking about are still relevant. I feel like they will always be relevant. But when we started, like when I started teaching, I looked into the origins and of pedagogy, and I came across this thing called Bloom's taxonomy. And at the base of that pyramid was remember. And that's pretty close to memorization. And I think building on that remember is understand, and create is at the top of the pyramid. I feel like those things are still relevant because knowledge is or information is useless if you don't know how to recall it at the time you need it and how to adapt its use. So I feel like the information is always available to us by just asking Siri or doing a search on Google. So I just recently read this article that kids now, whenever they're talking, they need a search engine because they're like, like I myself notice that sometimes because I'm heavily into movies and a lot of abstract and foreign film. So whenever I'm talking about a film to my friends, and I'm like, oh, that film, that actor, let me just Google that real quick. Because, like I need a search engine to carry a conversation. So if it was some things like that, I had like a recall that I could just ask Siri and do it. I'm actually a bit paranoid about privacy of it. So I haven't done Alexa yet, but I feel like I'm pretty close. But all those skills about understand is still relevant, apply that knowledge is still relevant, analyze, evaluate, create. These things are still relevant. So it's just like memorizing things by rote. I feel like that is just irrelevant now. It's because we have information available whenever we need it. It just, we have to learn new things about, is this information credible? Because internet is full of information, but I just don't know which is the right one. And if I'm reading the wrong information, and that is at the base of my understanding, I feel like my entire adaptation and creation of those, that using that information is going to be wrong because my base was wrong. So I feel like that's the value in formal education, because these things are ratified by peer review. So they are from textbooks. It's not just some person who thought this is the correct way to do things decided to teach that. So that's the value that because we can rely on that information that we're getting from a university or that's in our textbook, not something that I educated myself because I read something on the internet.
Yeah, and I think that is such a key piece when you think about there's so much information out there, and just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. So how do you validate what you're taking in and justify it as truth or not truth? So that's a really a whole other conversation, I think, in terms of how technology is impacting learning. I'm wanting to be mindful that we leave some time for some folks to ask some questions. So maybe just one more question for you each, just to kind of to wrap it up a little bit. If you think about common places maybe like classrooms, libraries, grocery stores, places that we live in right now that are, slowly changing because of technology. If you could envision a common space even 10 years from now, what do you think will have changed about that particular space, maybe from the way that we interact with it currently?
Yeah,
Ron, did you want to?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. We can look back again in terms of how technology has changed our spaces in history. Where television coming into the family home, through the adoption of digital media, and how people have created media. And so now we need as we diversify our medium for deployment of digital media, we also have a convergence of how we're consuming it. We're seeing a convergence of how we learn. Game, film, entertainment, all those are now being on the same platform. And so some of that, those spaces that we have, and we're seeing it already. You go to the Minority Report movie where, eye recognition, or we'll walk into a store and geolocation will give me an idea what pants I need to wear. But that digital media now will create experiences for us that are more, quicker to adapt, give us access to more and more frequently, And there's going to be this sort of intersectionality between media and space and humans more and more. And, you know, whether that's a good or bad thing, we're going to see, you know, sort of a exploitation of those spaces. And so we have to be very protective of them as we can, and making sure that we still have that human connection and the ability to, you know, to be safe and have that cognitive space where we can actually think as well as humans and have that peace. But we're going to see a greater adoption of media, as well as and the rate of change will only get faster, and our inputs will only increase. So the skills that we have to learn will be able to manage that input and what's relevant for us and what's going to keep us healthy and safe that way. But those physical spaces across, you know, whether it's classrooms, we're seeing at Xpan, we can build a very immersive simulation, whether it's in VR or AR, but we're seeing now teachers bringing that into the classroom and maybe putting it on a smart board and saying, like, you know, come and interact with me on this in real time. Or we're going to take it to the field and use AR to actually say, hey, this is how we're actually going to use things. So all those spaces now can be utilized a little bit differently.
Absolutely. I often think now of talking about spaces for learning rather than spaces for teaching. The way that we interact with our space and our learning is just, it's different already, and it's only going to continue to get more different for sure. Pushkar, what would be your sort of final thoughts on what spaces might look like from in the future?
I think technology, the way it's evolving, and Ron was talking about it, like it's changing at an exponential rate. 10 years is too far. I feel like in 5 years, we're going to live differently. And we do live differently than we lived 2-3 years ago, pre-COVID times, as people call it. But I feel like industries like travel, education are going to be completely transformed. And we can see that with education already, that we are using collaborative tools. We are looking at remote learning. We are looking at synchronous and asynchronous learning. And some of these things were already there. The tools existed. We just used them well. And one thing I would like to point out is that even today, like right now, if we stopped inventing any new tech, I feel like we have quite a lot to go on. And it's not going to stop, obviously, because people are just working on newer things. But I feel like all these tools that we're using for remote learning, they already existed before COVID. We just started using them all together. So it's not just one technology, it just stacked technology stacked on top of another. So voice over IP and voice over internet, and then we layer persistent changes on that. So if I could create something and other people can see it in virtually, same with AR. So I feel like these technologies are going to just kind of start stacking up on top of another. And like, I feel like it's been so long, and we're almost at the end of this conversation, and nobody has mentioned Metaverse. So I thought I will be the one. But I feel like we are going to have at least the starting of that in the next 5 years. And we already have some metaverses, like education. There's already a metaverse where we meet and talk about things. Then there is a gaming metaverse. Then there's a shopping metaverse like Amazon and Shopify. I feel like soon these all different metaverses will kind of start combining, and we won't have the Oasis, I feel, yet from the Ready Player One, but I feel like we are kind of getting closer. It's kind of a spatial internet is how I see it. I don't think it's such a foreign idea that we haven't thought of it. It's just physical internet is how I see it. So a lot of things are going to change, but especially I feel like the industries I'm close to, travel, education, gaming, medicine, are going to change for sure.
I think we have our next topic, Metaverse. I wouldn't have ever even thought to go there. So let's do this again, because I think that would be a really great discussion to have as well. So I want to thank you, Ron and Pushkar, for your thoughts, and I hope you don't mind me sort of drilling you with all of these different questions. I do want to open it up now just for any of our attendees that may have questions of their own. You can always type out your question in the Q&A box there at the bottom, and if we get some questions, then I'm happy to pose those to our panelists for them to answer. Don't see anything kind of popping up at this exact moment. Give people a minute to think. Are there, Luis, did you want to jump in with any sort of information or anything?
Well, basically, yeah, I wanted to ask a question, and this is something that came out from what I originally thought about this conversation, and it feels like quite a lot of what we have to do in order to adapt to the new, new technology, new knowledge, new media that we are getting into. Seems like it's not knowledge of transfer. Seems it's more like a knowledge of attitude, more like a communication and having a very an attitude that is towards beginner's mind. I don't know if this is something that you share, but I'm very curious to see where are you when it comes about trying to refresh or trying to go back to what you originally thought or what you originally decided to do, and then facing a challenge with the technology and try to overcome that.
Yeah, introducing play and that beginner mindset, and I agree totally, Luis, that it's like it is a mindset. Technology is just a conduit, and it is that curiosity. It is the the vulnerability and the humility as a learner to keep learning and falling and failing and keep going over those challenges and regardless of where you are, and that's why I think having knowledge and the actual benefit, the benefit of actually using technology is it can meet a person where they are and actually bring them along that journey at their own pace. And it's a wonderful way for allowing people. And if we use good UX and good design, we can draw people along with that sort of mindset and curiosity. And it's a wonderful thing to see being done well.
It's such a fascinating way of looking at it, like a beginner's mindset. I feel like something that we do use every day in gaming and technology. But I feel like I kind of got that into a beginner's mindset because I come from advertising. So every couple of months, I would work on a different campaign for different client. So just to give you an example, I used to work on Lipton tea for Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey. So for that 3 years period, I became an expert on tea, and I could just talk to anybody about tea for about an hour. I still can. It'll be boring, but I still can. Then after a while, I started working on General Motors. So I started getting into trucks and how the automobile industry works and how do they make money. Then I started working on banking. So I always had that beginner's mindset, and I feel like the switching clients kind of helped me develop those skills. So that's why whenever you meet people from advertising at a party, they're great conversationalists for the first 15 minutes, but after that, you better move on because they're going to go into a loop. But I feel like that kind of stuff, because I go in there fresh and I have no biases, so you have to clear your mind, not go with any biases that you have preconceived notions. But if you go with that beginner mindset and if you introduce doing things collaboratively or learning through play, because our whole quest in gaming is that finding the fun, right? That's what we do for everything. So we just worked on a AR game some time ago, which was we were teaching kids how to use basic concepts of math, chemistry, and science by building an AR cannon, which Da Vinci designed about 100 years ago. So they create this thing called spring art. They find parts, they make gunpowder, and they put it together and they fire this spring art. And it was such a cool way of learning chemistry. I feel like if I had students, if I had teachers to teach me chemistry like that, I feel like I would have been definitely into chemistry, maybe even working towards getting my PhD or be a Nobel laureate, right? Because I would have been introduced to those ideas in a fun way and not something I have to just think about. Why I find AR and VR so fascinating, and most people might be probably bored because it just brings it back there. But I feel like AR and VR are technologies which make whatever you do, the behavior as a memory. It's not a thing you read on a piece of paper. It becomes a memory. So that's why there's a higher retention and a higher recall, because you not only read it, it's like reading a map or getting lost in that neighborhood. When you get lost in the neighborhood, you just know every nook and cranny, this smell, sound, light, which make you remember it longer, rather than just reading a map and north, west, south. And most people don't understand. I'm not very good at map, but if I get lost in a new city, I can find my way back. So yeah, that beginner mindset is key, combined with continuous learning.
And also Google. because Google Maps will get you everywhere you need to go now.
Yeah.
Very well. All right. Well, we've hit 6 o'clock. I don't see any questions here in the Q&A. So I don't know, Albrina and Luis, do you want us to wrap up?
Yeah,
I'll pass the mic back to you.
Well, thank you so much. And what can I say? For me, I'm amazed by the density of knowledge and good understanding of the next couple of months, couple of years are going to come. I guess for me, it's just welcoming you to the community and once again inviting you to come back in the near future so we can learn more about what's ahead, because certainly you are always one step ahead of us. And if I can, I just one of the things that I will bring with me is just how important is storytelling and becoming not only a technician but also being able to use the media to develop a whole memorable message. So I loved having you here, and thank you all of you for sharing this with the community, and also thank you all the attendees that bypass the issues with Meetup, and I will try to share with the rest of the community the video. So if anybody was stopped because of technology, they will be able to hear your message. Albina, you want to share something with us? Or?
I just want to say thank you, Trisha, Ron, and Pushkar for such an amazing conversation. I was tuned in the entire time, and yeah, I learned a lot. So thank you so much. And for folks that's still here with us, we will send out the recording and any relevant resources that you can continue your learning, your lifetime learning. I'll pass it back to you, Luis.